What's going on, folks? Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. And this week, we're going over UFC Vegas 48, headlined by a light heavyweight scrap, somewhat of a short notice light heavyweight scrap here, at least for the 5 round side of things. We got Johnny Walker going up against Jamal Hill. As most of you guys know, Rafael Fiziev versus Rafael dos Anjos was originally scheduled to headline this card. Unfortunately, I believe there's visa issues on the Fiziev side of things, and now we got they pushed that fight back. Thank God it's still going to be 5 rounds. They pushed it back to UFC 272, which, let's be honest, needed a little bit of bolstering either way. So I didn't mind that one getting pushed back. Mediocre card that we got coming up here, but hopefully there are some entertaining fights. After finishing up the tape earlier today, or a couple hours ago, I should say, not many bright betting opportunities I see for this card. So it's going to be quite a light card for me in terms of betting once I see where all the line movement goes. But for most of it, I don't really feel intrigued to even put a lock of the night on this card. I will more than likely be skipping out on a 4 or 5 unit play for this card, but a couple of spots that I'll likely be sprinkling. So hopefully we can still come back with some profit this weekend. So for the audio listeners, you guys aren't really going to notice this, but this is actually a live show. Started getting a little bit behind on a little bit of the tape and the work that I wanted to do. So instead of releasing this in bits and pieces with every single breakdown, I'm going to be doing it all in one shot. And it's kind of like the good old days doing it this way as well. I will say for the video listeners, everybody that's in the live chat right now, appreciate you guys hanging with me pretty much at midnight now for this podcast. Unfortunately, just out of respect for the audio listeners and people watching this on the replay, I'm going to get through this as smooth and crisp as possible. Pretty much, I won't be taking too many questions or comments, so I apologize for that. I hope you guys enjoy the show. Otherwise, you guys are always welcome to get your comments and suggestions heard on the other streams that I do, the Propping You Up that I'm going to be doing on Thursday, Ultimate Weigh-In show on Friday, and then obviously the Fight Day live chat on Saturday. And then not to mention, last thing, the IG Live, the new IG Live. That I'm doing every Friday nights before the UFC events, 7 p.m. Eastern, where I talk to you guys face to face. You guys hop on IG Live with me, and we talk about whatever your favorite bets are for that card. So I truly appreciate that. So again, apologies to anybody that wants to get their comment read on the stream. That's not what we're going to be doing here. We're just going to run through. The card as best as possible here without too many disruptions. All right. So, as we normally do on every Lawcast episode, we go over the last event. Winning, losing, doesn't really matter, but that's exactly what we're going to be doing. And it was a losing night for your boy, unfortunately. Minus 6.56 units on UFC 271. So, let's go through every single bet pretty briefly here to go over what my thought was and how it ended up transpiring. Let's start off with the lock of the night play. I had 4 units on Sergey Morozov at minus 208. Great boxing, as we saw in that first round. I wanted him to go for his wrestling a little bit sooner than he did, but had some massive success with his striking. Happy with that. Hurt him a couple times, and then after he hurt Douglas a couple times, he dragged him to the ground, and then really didn't follow up on trying to finish him, which was kind of shitty. He should have let him back to his feet and then let his hands go. But then he fell a little bit too much in love with his striking in the second round and ultimately paid for it. And Douglas was able to get him out of there. Talk about a veteran performance from Douglas Silva de Andrade to absolutely destroy our lock of the night play there. Hand in hand with my lock of the night play, I also had 4 units on Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier, 3 units at minus 167, 1 unit at minus 155. Hell, the line even got down to around minus 140, minus 138 on fight day, a couple hours before the actual card kicked off. Shout out to anybody that got in on him nice and early there, but he should have been my lock of the night play. Obviously, hindsight is always 2020, but it went down pretty much how I expected it to, outside of Derek Brunson rocking him in that near the ending of that first round. Luckily, Jared Cannonier has a hellacious chin, and he's able to take those kind of shots, and then eventually was able to come back in that second round and find that knockout blow, which I expected him to at a certain point in that second round. For anybody that tuned into propping you up last week, you guys know that Cody, shout out to Cody Saftik, he actually put out one of his favorite props was the second round KO plus 600 for Jared Cannonier that night. Hopefully some people were able to tail that. Next up, I had my dog of the night play, 2 units on Jared Vender at plus 140. Did not go our way. I believe he got him into the positions that he needed to. He was cutting off the cage well. He was moving well. He just wasn't throwing until the third round, which is the only round that he ended up winning that night. However, if he was able to let his hands go a little bit more, like we've seen from him in the past, if he started to do it earlier, I think he could have easily won that fight. But there was plenty of stalemate-ish moments there where, Vandera had him up against or had him close to the cage, was pretty much just waiting for his moment to pop. And then Arlovsky was the one that actually ended up throwing the shot and then pivoting out of those bad positions and then winning those small little scenarios. He's just winning by inches in those spots, but still ended up winning. So that's -2 units on the dog of the night play there. I had a couple violence bets. The Ronnie Lawrence versus Manny Martinez one unit at plus 155 on the under 2.5. Ronnie Lawrence drops him 3 times, I believe, in the second round alone. We got a drop in knockdown in the third round as well. Still don't end up cashing that under. Again, I don't regret it because it was a plus 155 shot and the openings were there for the finish, but we ultimately don't end up getting to cash it. The one that seemed like a trap was the other under, which was AJ Dobson versus Jacob Malkoun. I had 1.5 units at -144. Dobson's grappling defense a lot better than I expected it to be, at least in terms of stopping Malkoun for getting him out of there. And I was kind of expecting Malkoun to get his grappling started even in that first round, but Dobson did a good job of really nullifying that, but he just was not able to keep that up for the remainder of the fight, and Malkoun pretty much just grinded him out for the last 10 minutes there. So -1.5 units there. And then lastly, I had a half unit shot on Robert Whittaker at plus 225. Fight played out closer than than most people expected it to be. There's a lot of people adamantly on the Israel Adesanya side saying that Adesanya deserved that regardless. But I thought there was a solid case for Robert Whittaker rounds 2, 4, and 5. Again, commentary was very biased in my opinion. If you guys go back and watch those rounds, I thought they were very close, very debatable. Either way, not a robbery. 48-47, in my opinion, was the correct scorecard for either side. So shout out to anybody that cashed in on anybody that was able to cash in on Israel Adesanya there as the favorite. Hopefully Robert Whittaker ends up getting another crack sometime down the road, but he's going to have to string together another win streak, just like he did last time, to earn himself another shot at Israel Adesanya. So again, all in all, -6.56 units. Not a good start to the year. I cashed on the first event, but then since then we've had 3 straight losing events, even though I cashed my lock of the night play on the last event, which was Sean Strickland. That's not what matters. It's the event that most recently happened and the one that's about to happen. And hopefully the one that's about to happen is the one that we end up cashing. Couple quick plugs before we get into the actual breakdowns here. Patreon, $5 a month, link in the description below. Again, I was supposed to drop the early breakdowns for the folks. The best bets and props article has been up for a couple of days. Completed that earlier today. Pay-per-view parlay for the patrons, a great Discord community, prize picks tips. There's so much content that I put up on the Patreon. Again, it's only $5 a month. So if you want to support your boy, that's the best way in doing so. Shout out to anybody that dropped a super chat already as well. Trust me, I greatly appreciate that. I see that as well. Love you guys. All right. And lastly, one of the best sponsors that I got here, Coolbet. Use promo code MMALOTN2. That's the number 2, as you guys see it on the screen there. They'll match your initial deposit up to 100%, up to $100. So make sure you guys go check them out. You can parlay props. They have great odds as well. Sometimes they're a little bit slow with moving lines, so you might be able to attack some lines that may have started moving on other websites. So that's another advantage you guys can get over there on Coolbet. And again, something that a lot of the degenerates like, they like parlaying props, and that's something that I like to do a lot on Coolbet as well. All right, let me take a swig of water here, and we're going to get right down into the breakdowns. Shout out to the 33 live viewers that we currently have on the live stream here at midnight. If you guys haven't already, make sure you guys drop that like and subscribe below. All right, let's get into the fights here. First up, we got Jesse Strader going up against Chad Anheliger. In terms of odds, we got minus 255 on the Canadian and plus 205 the return on Strader. Now, this is one of those spots where I feel like the line is just a little bit too wide to begin with, right? And Anheliger came into his Dana White Contender Series fight as a pretty hefty dog himself. Very close fight, 1-1 going into that third round. And luckily, he was able to pull it off, having a little bit more in the tank to go out there and out volume and outwork Muin Gafurov, I believe the kid's name was. But I feel like Jesse Strader, on the other hand, is falling into that Zaruk Adeshev and Parker Porter syndrome thing where they got finished pretty easily in their first fight, and people are just ultimately writing them off now, thinking that's exactly what's going to happen every time they step into the cage. Obviously, Adeshev and Porter have been able to prove people wrong as big underdogs in their past fights, and Strader has a chance to do it here. He has some pretty good Muay Thai, throws in combinations, really likes to work the body, but throws everything and the kitchen sink into his shots. And Anheliger on the other side seems to like to work in combinations as well. He uses his lead hand to kind of just gauge his distance, and then he really starts to do his best work with his right straight down the middle. But I'm expecting this fight to pretty much play out as a firefight. I'm expecting both guys to throw down. If there's anybody that engages in the grappling here, I do think it's going to be the Strader side of things, as we have seen him actually go for takedowns in the past, not to the most effective limits. You know what I mean? I think he leaves a lot to be desired in terms of being able to maintain top control. And even when he hurts his opponent, sometimes he goes for the takedown, which I wouldn't really advise in certain situations. But the guy can crack, and that's something that we definitely have to respect here. The spot that I'm looking at, under 2.5. That's currently sitting around minus 135, but I'm expecting both guys to throw with absolute heat in this fight. And Anheliger has talked about in certain interviews that he's looking to make Strader work early here and then eventually put him away late. Some statistics for you guys to kind of chew on in terms of as to why I like the under 2.5 here. 6 out of the 7 fights on Strader's record have gone have finished inside the distance. On the flip side, with Anheliger, 14 out of his 16 fights have finished inside the distance. Now, Anheliger, again, he was a pretty hefty dog coming into his Dana White Contender Series fight, and now all of a sudden he's a big favorite over a guy that got finished quickly in his UFC debut. This fight will absolutely play out closer than the odds suggest. I personally have Anheliger around 60% in this fight, but I still think he gets it done, as I do think he's the slightly crisper striker, the more disciplined guy as well. Strader at times will wade a little bit too much to the body and leaves himself open to get clipped, and I think Anheliger will do a good job in terms of finding that spot. I've seen a couple of guys that I respect on the Strader side, and I completely get it. The line is off. But rather than taking the chalk on that Anheliger side, I'm going to be taking the under 2.5 here once limits start to open up on the websites that I have access to. So official prediction here is going to be Anheliger, and I think he gets it done probably by second round TKO after he catches Strader with something in this spot. All right, let's keep this thing moving along here. Again, shout out to everybody in the chat. I appreciate everybody stopping by. I'm just going to try to get through this as best as possible. As you guys can tell, my voice is feeling it for some reason. Not entirely sure why. It kind of hurts to talk right now, but for you guys, I'll get through it as well. Luckily, one of the fights I actually had pre-recorded, so I'll be able to take a little bit of a breath, but that's not to the Parker Porter and Alan Baudot fight, which is a little bit later in the card. So let's keep this thing moving along. Next up, we got a women's I believe this is a strawweight fight. Let me just quickly confirm that. Women's strawweight fight here. Minus 110 on both sides between Diana Belbita and Gloria De Paula. Interesting to note here that Diana Belbita actually opened up as a minus 260 favorite, and the line has steadily come in as a ton of love has started to come in on Gloria De Paula, and I completely understand that. On paper, this seems like it's going to be a close fight, right? Both women, mainly strikers, they like to go out there, put their strikes together, and try to break their opponents in that aspect. Unfortunately, some of them have had to face grapplers in the past, which is why they've been coming up short in most of their UFC fights. Belbita obviously got ragdolled by Molly McCann for a couple of rounds. The next fight, I believe she showed some poor fight IQ, absolutely letting up Liana Jojo on the feet, then decides to take it to the ground and then gets woman armbarred from card. Not a good look from Belbita there, but she turned that around in her next fight against Hannah Goldie, where she was able to absolutely touch up Goldie from the outside. She had a 3-inch height and 7-inch reach advantage in that fight, which truly aided her in being successful in that fight. Now, in this fight against Paula, she's going to have a 2-inch height advantage, but only a 1-inch reach advantage. And I don't think she'll have as much success as she did in the Hannah Goldie fight. The concern for both of these women has been the grappling. If there's either of these women that look to engage in the grappling, I think they'll find success. And I think that the one that will look to grapple, if it gets to that point, is going to be Gloria. Obviously, we know she's a significant other of Mara Bueno Silva, and I'm not saying that just because she's a significant other of her that her jiu-jitsu skills are going to rub off on Paula, but I absolutely believe that they see that as an opening for them to take this fight to the ground and try to find a victory that way as well. Belbita, she trains out of a House of Champions up here in the Southern Ontario region in Canada, but they don't really have anybody that's a huge standout in terms of the grappling realm that will allow Belbita to get out of those bad positions. She showed some good grappling defense against Hannah Goldie at certain times, showing some good takedown defense, but there was one very skeptical moment at the ending of that fight where she found herself in full mount with Goldie on top of her and Goldie just raining down blows. Unfortunately for Goldie, it was a little bit too late for her, and Belbita was still able to pick up the decision victory that night, but still gives you some question marks in terms of if anybody wants to go out there and grapple Belbita, they might have some success. But even if this turns out to be a striking battle, which I kind of hope it does because it could give us a pretty entertaining fight, I do think that DePaulo will be the slightly more disciplined fighter here. Belbita likes to go balls to the wall at times, and she was able to get away with it on the Romanian regional scene. But as she starts to take steps up in competition, I think she's going to struggle with that a little bit more. Like I said, I thought she was successful in the Goldie fight because she was able to maintain that range and have success by hitting a little bit harder. But I think that DePaulo will be the one throwing in better combinations, will be the one with the tighter, crisper shots down the middle, and will be disciplined in this spot and even attack with leg kicks, which I think will start to slow down Belbita as the fight starts to go on here. So again, for me, it's a coin flip fight. I slightly lean on the DePaulo side, probably like 55%, just because I believe that she'll be able to land the better shots. But if Belbita is able to match her volume and even out volume her, that could make it sticky for DePaulo in terms of being able to get her hand raised. She's going to have to land the better shots. She's going to have to counter effectively here. And again, if she kicks consistently here, that could also help her win this fight optically as well on the judges' scorecards if it does go the full 15 minutes. So I lean to Paula here. I completely understand why the line came in as much as it did. And I know DePaulo was my lock of the night fade last time around where I was able to cash on Cheyenne Vlismus. But again, that was a very different stylistic matchup. Vlismus was looking to get that fight to the ground, which she was able to. And although she was not able to maintain that top control, she did obviously land that big kick as DePaulo was starting to stand up, and she was able to get the knockout there. I'm not understanding why. I saw shout out to my guy Prodigy MMA, who normally puts up the implied odds based on Tapology scoring or voting. And I believe it was only 9% of folks that believed that DePaulo was going to win the fight. Doesn't make any sense to me. Really does not. But then again, now it's kind of understood that Tapology voting is more so like a popularity contest than anything, because some of these odds are just out of whack, and this was definitely one of them. I do like the DePaula side here. No bet for me unless we get her back to solid plus money. Like I said, I do favor her ever so slightly, which would mean, I should take her at this pick a mod or at these pick a mods, but something's just keeping me back at this moment in time. But I will pick DePaula to win this fight. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got Skelly going up against Mark Striegl. In terms of odds, we are currently looking at minus 200 for Skelly, plus 170 the return on Mark Striegl. Now, Skelly, man, the guy has been hit with a ton of unfortunate cancellations. I believe there's been about 5 of them. Oh, sorry, 4 fights that have fallen through since September 2019 for Skelly. 2 of them he was forced to pull out of. One of them was actually the Jamal Lammers fight, where Jamal Lammers actually suffered from back spasms minutes before he was actually supposed to make the walk. And that fight ultimately ended up getting canceled. But Skelly has had to deal with numerous surgeries, numerous injuries. He's had a long layoff, and not to mention, apparently he's talking about retiring after this fight, which is never really a good look. I'm not sure if that's due to his injuries or the fact that he just can't get consistent fights, especially considering that he's probably not on the greatest fighter pay scale at the moment. The guy's got to pick up another job to just survive pretty much. Hopefully, knock on wood, he doesn't have to pull out of this fight upcoming here against Mark Striegl, because it should be a fun one. Both guys are grappling-based fighters. Skelly, I think, is a little bit better in terms of scrambling, so I do believe that he'll likely get the better of most of these exchanges, but the injury and layoff and everything I just laid out earlier plays into it a little bit. It makes me a little bit more self-conscious about actually making a bet on Skelly at the spot, especially at minus 200. Mark Striegl, on the other hand, obviously fell short in his UFC debut against Said Nurmagomedov. Came in as a pretty hefty underdog there, and ultimately fell to the power of Said that night. And he was scheduled to fight, I believe, back in April. Unfortunately, he had to pull out. And now, since then, apparently he's been healthy, ready to go. And he's even changed his training camp to go down there to Arizona and work with the MMA lab, Benson Henderson, John Crouch, and those guys. So I'm interested to see how they're able to help Striegl's game out. Like I said at the top of the breakdown here, both guys are grapple-heavy based fighters, and I think that Striegl's strength advantage here will likely only help him for a little bit, unless he gets Skelly out of there, which I think is going to be very difficult for him to do. I think Striegl will start to slow down as the fight starts to go on, and I think Skelly will start to take over, winning the scrambles, winning the grappling exchanges, and then eventually finding himself on top. There's a couple spots that I've been looking at here, props wise, which I'm still waiting for them to drop. But Skelly round 3, always intriguing to me for that round 3 prop, especially a guy in Striegl who's shown to absolutely slow down later in fights, most notably the Reese McLaren fight. And then Skelly by decision at plus 230 as well is something that intrigues me. The over 2.5 is currently at minus 115, but again, the Striegl gas tank worries me too much that Skelly could potentially get him out of there later in this fight. Yeah, I like Skelly here. Too many out of cage factors here that are kind of keeping me off of him, but I still think that he goes out there and gets his hand raised. I'm going to call it third round TKO as he just beats Striegl to each position and then eventually finds a finish near the ending of this fight, second or third round in this spot. So, yeah, we'll go with Skelly. And I think that's him riding off into the sunset with a W in his MMA career. All right, let's keep this train moving along. Let's get. I knew there's going to be some trolls popping in here. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got Jessica Rose Clark going up against Stephanie Egger. In terms of odds, we're currently looking at minus 190 for Clark, plus 160 the return for Egger. Now, this seems to be a grappling-based fight as well, right? You got Clark in her last two fights who's been going out there and just trying to grind her opponents into the ground. Obviously, she had tremendous success against Alpar, eventually getting her out of there in the third round. And then in the Edwards fight, it seemed like she struggled in terms of holding her down. But I think the difference between Alpar and Edwards was that Edwards was actually working off her back. She was trying to throw up submissions. She was trying to pull off reversals, trying to get back to her feet, whereas Alpar was really struggling to get anything going off of her back. Egger, black belt in judo. I believe she medaled at the Olympics as well. We saw her judo on full display in her last fight against Shanna Young. She was able to hit judo throws, eventually find herself in very good position on top, and was able to find some success, really just with a ground and pound from on top, and then eventually getting Shanna Young out of there in the second round. She struggled in her UFC debut, obviously against Tracy Cortez, who will likely be looking to employ, Jessica Rose Clark will likely be looking to employ what Tracy Cortez was successful with, but I think that Cortez is a much better wrestler and grappler than what Clark brings to the table. Yeah, she's getting stronger. She's really trying to fill out this 135-pound frame, but Egger's a big woman in her own right. She's very strong as well, and I do think she could actually take advantage of these desperation takedowns that could be coming from Clark later on in this fight. Clark may have a slight advantage in terms of the striking, but I don't think it's going to be anything that's hugely detrimental to Egger here. I think Egger, if she wants, she could clinch up with Clark and manage to get this fight to the ground if she needs to, which is why this line is a little bit puzzling to me. I think there's value on Egger as the underdog here at plus 160, as I do think that she will, again, land takedowns when she needs to. Her striking is slowly coming together. But I do like Egger in the spot. I'm not sold on Clark. Yeah, you can beat Sarah Alpar. Yeah, you can beat Jocelyn Edwards, but she's beating Edwards literally just by holding her down. I'd be surprised, excuse me, if she's able to hold down Egger as effectively as she was able to hold down Edwards. And then I think that's going to cause Clark to start slowing down because she's using so much energy to hold a girl like Egger down or even trying to get her to the floor. Again, I could be completely wrong in Clark's approach here. She may look to go out there and actually try to and strike with Egger. But again, I just don't think it's too big of an advantage to justify a minus 190 price tag. So I'll see as the fight week starts to go on. If Egger becomes a bigger underdog, I might look to better here. I even have I have this fight closer to a 50-50 than anything, which should, say that I should go out there and make a bet on Egger in this situations, considering that she's at plus 160. I might have to make a play on her. Oh, we'll see. We'll see where the line goes. It just seems like there's just a unanimous love for Jessica Rose Clark out there because she's going up against the more experienced women. She has a better strength of schedule. But this is the third fight for Egger inside the UFC, and growing up in that Switzerland, Scandinavian region, there's not many regional promotions for her to go out there against quality opponents. So we can't really, hate on her too much for not having a great strength of schedule. Now she's getting the opportunity to do so. And I think Clark fits between Tracy Cortez and Jocelyn Edwards. Tracy Cortez and Shanna Young. And I think Egger has the chops to go out there and actually get the W here. So I'm going Egger. Another spot that I didn't mind was the over in this spot, which is currently minus 190, minus 200. I think this will play out like a grappling fight. I don't think that if Tracy Cortez was not able to get Egger out of there, I doubt Clark will. And I think Clark is quite durable. I think she'll find herself safe in certain situations, but I do think that Egger will get the better of those scenarios more than likely with takedowns and just maybe being the stronger woman. So yeah, I'm going to Egger via decision. Don't understand why the line is so wide. I get why Clark is the favorite. I just don't think it should be this wide. So I'm going Egger as the underdog here. All right, next up, we got Gabriel Benitez versus why can't I remember? Why can't I remember what Onama's first name is? David Onama. There we go. Yeah, minus 145 on Onama, plus 125 the return on Gabriel Benitez. In terms of the opener here, Onama actually opened up as a slight underdog at plus 105, and then steady love has been coming in on him, even pushing him as high as minus 160 at certain spots, but now he's down to around that minus 135 range. Now, I know David Onama actually likes David Onama had a pretty close fight against Mason Jones as a very big underdog in that fight, in a fight that he came in on relatively short notice with. But I think people are overreacting to that performance a little bit too much. I get it. He was a plus 400 underdog in that fight, and he was able to touch Mason Jones a lot. He made it look closer than minus 400 or minus 500 for Mason Jones, but that's Mason Jones' style. Like, if you go back and watch his Cage Warriors fights or any of his fights, he was getting touched up in every single one of those fights. Like, that's just his style. He's hard-nosed. He moves forward. He takes some shots. He has an iron chin, which is why he was able to take those shots, but he still was able to rely on his wrestling to get the fight to the ground when he needed to against Onama and grind him out that way. But Benitez is a legitimate striker, man. Great southpaw with a great body kick, great inside leg kick as well. Had his moments of success against much better strikers like Sodiq Yusuff, and even fighters in the names that are kind of escaping me at the moment. But he is way more battle tested than Onama has been on the regional scene. And the interesting part about Onama on the regional scene is the fact that he was the hometown boy in every single fight. KFC or KAFC, I believe it was, or KCFC, whatever it's called, Kansas City Fighting Championships, and then FAC as well. He was on every one of those cards. Sketchy competition. Even his last fight before coming to the UFC, 37-year-old 5-1 guy. They're very sketchy, right? A lot of these guys seemed intimidated going in there with him as well, right? That's another very interesting thing that a lot of people seem to be overlooking here. But now that he has somewhat of a close fight against a very hittable guy in Mason Jones, he should automatically be the favorite against a guy like Gabriel Benitez, who's been in there with absolute killers in the past. I don't know. I get it. Benitez has been finished, I believe, 3 times now via KO in his UFC career, most recently by Billy Q, who not many people can replicate what Billy Q brings to the table. That's the difference, right? Billy just pushes and pushes and pushes and eventually breaks his opponents. But Onama doesn't fight like that. More often than not, Onama likes to kind of not be, I guess discipline is the right word, but he's not a crazy output kind of guy. He waits for his spots and tries to capitalize from there. But, at certain times he starts to get a little bit sloppy with his technique. And I think that's something that Benitez could take full advantage of here. And not to mention Onama, like I said, his level of competition on the regional scene is very sketchy. Once he starts striking with a guy like Benitez, I think he's going to really start to learn that, okay, there's levels to this shit. And sure, he could clip Benitez. Trust me, he has power. I don't want to say he does not power. He has power that he could potentially land on Benitez and get him out of there. But outside of that, I think Benitez will be the one having more success here, landing the body kick, landing the inside leg kick, and his straight down the middle is absolute money as well. So if Onama wants to overextend and throw a little bit too much here, I think Benitez will be able to counter effectively and land some good shots. Another angle that Benitez could take is possibly grappling Onama here, right? Onama's takedown defense even on the regional scene is not a good look. But Benitez has only ever shot 2 takedowns in his 11 UFC fights, one of those being a slam KO of Humberto Bandenay, who had a pretty tight armbar on him in that situation. Benitez slams him, knocks him out, and gets the win there. That's the only takedown he's ever completed, which is hilarious. So I'm not going to bank on him going out there and take a grapple-heavy approach here against Onama, but even in a striking battle, I think Benitez could do work here. He's the more proven fighter. He's gone up against way tougher competition. And yes, Onama has that KO possibility. But if he doesn't KO him here, I think Benitez will do absolute work, maybe even finish Onama himself, and then or go on to win a decision victory. And as my guy Goran is saying here, he rocks Sodiq, exactly. Had tremendous success in that fight as well. So I will likely wait on this line. I want to see if more Onama love starts to come in. Again, people overvaluing his performance against Mason Jones, which was great. Again, short notice. He did what he needed to do to go out there and try to find success. I don't want to take that away from him, but we need to find show the difference between a guy who has a 46% striking defense rate of Mason Jones and somebody who has a 65% striking defense rate in Gabriel Benitez. And we'll see that this weekend, in my opinion. So Benitez is going to be my play here. Likely my dog of the night play, but definitely my pick for this podcast as well. I'm going to go Gabriel Benitez via decision or a KO. Let's see. All right. Let's move on to the next fight here. I can feel my voice just escaping me, and I apologize for anybody that this sounds like complete shit to, but I will get through this as best as I can. The Parker Porter and Alan Baudot fight is just around the corner, so I'll be able to let my voice breathe for a couple minutes before I get back and finish off the podcast. But next fight up, we got Mario Bautista going up against short notice Jay Perrin. I just want to see if they added the Perrin odds to best fight odds. They have not. I'm expecting to see heavy chalk on the Bautista side, honestly. So Perrin, very excruciating to watch his tape, man. Especially some of his earlier fights. The Kinmoy fight. I can't recall the fight before that, but a lot of his fights on Cage Titans was just him pushing his opponents up against the cage, not having too much success there. Like success in terms of control, but not much damage success. And unfortunately, for his opponents, they weren't able to get out of those positions. Johnny Campbell was the fight before the Kinmoy fight. But for 4 and 5 rounds, he's just able to push these guys up against the cage without much resistance and get away with wins like that. Then we saw him come onto the Contender Series, and I thought he deserved to win that fight. You know, he was having some good grappling success against the guy in Joseph. I can't remember the guy's first name, but Joseph was starting to slow down as the fight went on, and I thought Perrin was starting to get better as the fight went on. Unfortunately for him, he was not able to get the win that night. He does obviously bounce back in a fight against Diego Silva for Cage Titans as well, if I'm not mistaken, in a fight that I thought he got gifted a decision. I thought Diego Silva easily won that fight. If you guys go to the YouTube comment section for that fight, you see a ton of outrage in the comment section saying Diego Silva won that fight. I absolutely agree. Absolute hometown cooking. After that fight, though, he leaves Boston, goes over to Syndicate MMA. He has one fight on the regional scene there. I believe it was for CES, and he gets his hand raised there after getting a second round submission over Josh Smith, a guy who 10-6 didn't seem like the greatest opponent. Perrin was able to get his grappling going. So it's pretty simple. Bautista wants to keep the fight in the feet, uses striking, uses range. Perrin wants to get this fight to the ground, uses strength, and try to grapple and grind out Mario Bautista. Now, Perrin, even though he's taking this fight on short notice, he was actually scheduled for a fight 2 weeks later. So it's not like he's just getting off the couch and half-assing this fight. He's actually in training camp already. The only difference is that he has to speed up his weight cut now. He has to cut weight 2 weeks earlier than he was expecting to do. How that will affect him in the fight, who knows? We'll find out. But I don't know how much success Perrin's actually going to have trying to grapple Bautista into the ground here. Bautista has some decent knees in the clinch, and not to mention the size advantage he'll have in this fight and that knee up the middle. Anytime Perrin wants to kind of close the distance and either get a strike off or try to change levels, I think he's going to be eating that knee all day. I think Bautista will do a good job in terms of keeping him on the outside and really butchering him from that spot and having success from the outside. I do think that Bautista will more than likely finish him here as well. I think his striking is much better than what Perrin brings to the table. And Bautista was originally getting ready for a power puncher in Khalid Taha, who had a little bit of a wrestling background as well. But I think that this is a much easier matchup for him to go out there and do some work. I know Bautista's coming off an KO loss to Trevin Jones last time around. I don't know if Perrin has that knockout power that he really needs to worry too much about. But as long as he's not slacking too much here, he should be able to get off on his strikes and eventually find a finish of Perrin probably in the second or third round. So I like Bautista here. but I'm expecting him to be heavy chalk in this situation. Minus 200, I'd consider Bautista, but I'm expecting he's much more going to be much more chalk in this spot. Sorry, some of the comment sections are throwing me off here. I appreciate everybody that's chilling in the chat. All right, let's move on to the next fight. Again, I got Bautista. I think Bautista finishes him. I'm expecting him to be chalk. We'll see what the line drops at once it does drop. All right. Next fight here, Jonathan Pearce minus 335 going up against short notice Christian Rodriguez coming in at plus 260. Rodriguez coming off a regional win, but before that, he was actually on the Contender Series in a fight where he unfortunately missed weight by 2 pounds. And even though he came out on the winning end against Reyes Cortez, Tracy Cortez's brother, he was not eligible to get a contract that night. And he was forced to take one more fight. And now he gets his short notice call to the UFC. And the kid looks like he has some potential. He looks like he has solid striking, decent takedown defense, and a very promising game out of Roufusport. But I think that I do think that Pearce will likely be able to get that grappling off, which is what I think he needs to do here to have success. I think a part of the reason why Pearce accepted the short notice fight was because their training camp is the same training camp as Reyes Cortez. So they already have a bit of a blueprint on Christian Rodriguez. And I think that Pearce will be able to be successful in terms of what Reyes Cortez was not successful with, and that's getting Rodriguez to the ground. If this fight is in the striking realm, I think the 5-inch height advantage that Pearce is going to have here will make it difficult for Rodriguez to close the distance and get his striking going, because it opens up countering opportunities for Pearce, whether it's with striking or with grappling. But I think at a certain point, Pearce is going to get that grappling going, and I think the size is just going to be too much for him to handle here. I do like Pearce. I do like him inside the distance, which I currently think is sitting around plus 115. And I do think that Pearce goes out there and absolutely messes up Rodriguez. Again, Rodriguez taking this on short notice and up a weight class, not a good look for him, but I do think he will turn out to be a solid prospect in the UFC once he's able to go back down to 135 pounds and should start to do good work from there. He throws in good combinations. Once he starts to get into a flow state, it's very difficult for his opponents to really get back into the game, but I think he's going to struggle here with the size and the grappling that Pearce brings to the table. I will say this lastly, though. I kind of wrote off Pearce after getting finished by Joe Lozon in his UFC debut, but he has come back and stormed back in his next 2 fights by finishing Kai Kamaka and Omar Morales last time around. I think he keeps those finishing things away. He keeps those finishing ways going here by finishing Christian Rodriguez. I'm not putting all my eggs in the Pearce inside the distance basket here, but I do think he finishes Rodriguez. And will I parlay Pearce with something else later this week? Maybe. I may be. All right. Let's move on to the next fight here. We will move on to Joaquin Buckley going up against Abdul Razak Alhassan. In terms of odds, we're currently looking at minus 145 for Buckley, plus 125 the return on Alhassan. Now, this fight could be really fun that either ends within 7.5 minutes or both of these guys, actually 3 scenarios. It either ends under 1.5 or both of these guys respect each other too much and we get a staring contest for 15 minutes, or Joaquin Buckley has recently aligned himself with Extreme Couture, and I wouldn't be surprised if Eric Nixick and those guys try to draw up a plan to try to go out there and get D1 Buckley into the cage and try to wrestle Alhassan into the ground, something that Jacob Malkoun was successful with in doing last time around. Again, this is, I believe, the 3rd fight now for Alhassan up at 185 pounds, and although Buckley is not a big 185-pounder himself, it seems like he should have the strength advantage here if he looks to take this fight into the grappling realm. I don't think he'll have as much success as Malkoun in terms of controlling Alhassan on the ground, but it should make things interesting in terms of wearing on Alhassan and really trying to take away that knockout power of Alhassan. I do think Buckley will get the better of the striking exchanges. I do like his power striking, but I think that Alhassan, we've kind of come to know what he's all about, right? First round knockout or more than likely bust. And I think that this is going to be one of those scenarios where Buckley's combinations and some possible grappling could push this into the second and third rounds, ultimately allowing him to go out there and win this fight via decision. I get it. Everybody wants to see these guys go out there and throw big bombs because that's what they normally do well. But when you have two guys that throw bombs like these guys do, I could see this being a little bit more stalemate-ish, but Buckley having a little bit better of a game overall. I apologize, but my voice is really struggling to get through this, but I will get through it for you guys. So, Eileen Buckley, don't really like the money line. I'm considering taking a little bit of a sprinkle on his decision line at plus 390, as I do think that if he's able to survive that Al Hassan power early, he could start to take over this fight later in the fight. Possible live betting opportunity as well for Buckley after round one, as Al Hassan will likely have his most success in round one. The last thing I'll say about this matchup, I believe this is now the second training camp that Alhassan is going to have at Team Elevation over there in Denver, Colorado. So curious to see if they've employed anything new into this guy's game, and we'll see how that goes down. So yeah, let's go Buckley via decision, but I don't have uber confidence on that spot. Plus 390 on that decision though, not too bad. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got Jim 810 Miller going up against Carlos Motta. Sorry, Nicholas Motta. Carlos Motta is the LFA flyweight that just recently lost. Nicholas Motta minus 180, plus 155, the return on Jim Miller. Now, interestingly enough, this was closer to a pick'em the first time they were scheduled to fight each other. And the only difference is that Miller has fought a guy in Eric Gonzalez who hurt Miller early in their fight. But as soon as Miller was hurt, he was able to shoot a takedown, land the takedown, and then clear the cobwebs and eventually get the knockout of his own in the second round. Miller, even though he's getting up there in age and has the record, I believe, for the most UFC fights in UFC history, the guy still seems to be causing trouble for some of these up-and-comers that are trying to break into the UFC. Motta obviously won on the Dana White Contender Series in a fight where he only landed 44 strikes, but 42 of those were to the head. The guy was just head hunting in that fight, trying to knock out his opponent, Joseph Lowry, I believe the guy's name was. He was unable to do so, but he battered him enough that he was able to get the decision victory and ultimately a contract. He's mainly a striker, likes to go out there throwing combinations, try to knock his opponent out. The grappling is where he starts to struggle. It looks like he is improving that, though, since he lost on the Ultimate Fighter Brazil, where Gleico Franca was able to ground him in the second round and eventually finish him via submission. Motta has been grappled in plenty of other fights in the past, but he's been able to come out unscathed and ultimately find victories of his own. Miller, though, could make things interesting if he's able to get this fight to the ground, as I do believe he's one of the better wrestlers that Motta has gone up against in his last couple fights, and that could cause Motta some problems on the ground. The spot that I like here the most is actually the under 2.5, as I do think that Motta has the knockout power to put Jim Miller out, or Jim Miller has the BJJ to eventually put Motta into bad positions and possibly get him out of there. So either the fight doesn't go to decision or under 2.5, I think is a damn good spot. Motta via KO at plus 215, decent. And even Jim Miller by sub at plus 350, not a bad spot either. I am ultimately picking Motta to win this fight, as I do think his superior striking will allow him to find that chin of Miller and eventually put him out. But I only have him around 55%, making me believe that the minus 180 is just not worth the stab at this point. I'd rather take the violence bet and pray that one of these guys ends up getting the finish. But as an official prediction, I'm going to be going with Nicholas Motta, and I think he knocks him out. Let's call it second round TKO. All right. Let's move on to the next fight here. And luckily, it is Alan Baudot versus Parker Porter, where I already have the breakdown queued up for you guys as I did the breakdown for it last week. I'm going to let my voice breathe for a little bit and let you guys watch the breakdown that I did as a pre-recording. Enjoy. Parker Porter versus Alan Baudot. We got minus 250 on Parker and plus 200 the return on Baudot. Now, who would have thought we'd see a day where Parker Porter is minus 250, but here we are, and it's completely understandable considering he's going up against Alan Baudot, who, in my opinion, is a step down from the last two fights that Parker Porter was able to get his hand raised in. Now, Porter came into the UFC on short notice, 2 weeks notice to be exact, and apparently he had to cut almost 30 pounds of weight to make weight for that 265-pound limit, again, given the short notice nature of that fight. And I do think that had to do or played a part in him getting knocked out, although Chris Daukaus, very good striker, fast with his hands, and eventually that knockout was probably going to come anyway. But now we see him training a little bit more, way more regularly, not having to cut a tremendous amount of weight to get to that heavyweight limit. And it's obviously showing in his last two fights where he's able to pick up wins over Josh Parisian as a big underdog, and then obviously against Chase Sherman as a slight underdog in that fight. I had the pleasure of being at Parker Porter's last fight, and I'm sure if you guys listen closely enough, you guys probably would be able to hear me cheering for him, as I did obviously have a bet on him that night. But he showed a great MMA skill set that night. Great striking, good takedowns, good top control, and his durability really showed off in that fight, as Chase Sherman did land some good shots in that fight as well. He's going to eat some shots here from Baudot as well. Baudot is a striker, obviously out of France and that MMA factory gym, but he doesn't really show much else than that, right? It's been shown over and over now that you can take him down and really have your way with him, although he did have a really good first round against Rodrigo Nascimento last time, where he did hit him with some big shots, have him on wobbly legs, but it seemed as soon as that second round started, he came out flat-footed and he paid for it, and we saw Nascimento get him out of there. Tom Aspinall takes him down right into full mount and then starches him in his UFC debut. And I'll say this, his win that got him into the UFC was actually a loss. If you guys look into it, and actually I believe the footage is on Fight Pass, he gets choked out in that fight. Unfortunately, Todd Stout tests positive for marijuana after the fight, and the Quebec Commission, no idea what they're smoking, but not only do they overturn the fight, they label it as a win for Alain Baudot in that fight, which is absolutely egregious. I don't understand it. Todd does not deserve that loss on his record, but what happened in that fight was even more eye-opening. Todd Stout's more of a striker. He wants to go out there and take your head off. His nickname is the Black Hulk, for God's sakes, right? That's his striking, or his style, knockouts. But in that fight, he looked to take the fight to the ground, which he did with ease, and then he eventually got his first ever submission victory with ease. And I'm expecting the same thing here with Parker Porter. If he's able to survive the early onslaught from Alan Baudot, because we have to give him a little bit of respect, right? He is a decent striker with some good power. Again, he's up at heavyweight, so it could absolutely happen. But if Porter is able to survive that early onslaught, he should be able to get takedowns eventually, and I think from there he should be able to get a submission as well. He has a couple of submission victories on his record, and I do think he'll be able to get another one here against Alan Baudot. He's even talked about it in a couple interviews where he's expecting to get his first ever UFC finish. And once you run the tape, it makes absolute sense. So a part of me is hoping that they're setting the over-under at 2.5, but I think that the odds makers are going to be wise to it, and they'll probably set it at 1.5. But that fight doesn't go to decision. Will probably be minus 500 or minus 400 or something like that. But I'd be happy to throw it on into multiple parlays, because I know Porter will more than likely get a finish in this fight. He will absolutely be able to get this fight to the ground should it reach round 2. And then from there, he should be able to find a finish, whether it's a key lock, a rear naked choke, arm triangle choke, whatever it may be. He will be able to find that finish on the ground, or even a ground and pound, right? So maybe not get too greedy by just taking the sub prop. Maybe taking the inside the distance wouldn't be too bad of an idea, but I'll definitely be sprinkling that submission prop if it's at a good number. So, yeah. If you can't tell already, I love me some Parker Porter in this spot. I think he's absolutely justifiable at this minus 250 line, but that first round is going to be a little bit iffy, as Baudot could potentially land a big shot. So maybe a round 1 Baudot hedge, considering he's a plus 200 underdog, that round 1 might look like plus 400 or plus 500. Not too bad of a line to hedge on if you feel you're too deep on the Parker Porter side, but I like Porter here We're going with Parker Porter, and I'll take him to win this fight by second round submission. There you guys have it. Parker Porter submission, but the spot that I like the most is the fight doesn't go to decision, and I'll likely be parlaying that with something else on this card, just to take advantage of that. And even Porter by sub, which I believe they've released a line for now. Porter by sub plus 600, not bad. Might have to take a little bit of a sprinkle on that, considering getting submitted by strikers back in the day, and I think that Porter could do that as well. Maybe in his patented Kimura or Americana. Who knows what comes through. All right, let's move on to the co-main event here. Who would have thought Jamie Pickett plus 210 finds himself in a co-main event slot? But here we are, taking on a short notice fight to take on Kyle Daukaus. Pickett, fresh off of his win over Joseph Holmes back in January. Luckily for him, didn't take too much damage in that fight, and he was able to take this short notice spot against Kyle Daukaus. Unfortunately, this 2-fight winning streak for Jamie Pickett is going to come to a screeching halt, as I believe Kyle Daukaus is perfectly lined here, maybe even not wide enough, honestly. Daukaus, much better grappler, BJJ black belt. His striking is improving. He'll be the stronger of the two, I think, especially in those clinch positions. But I don't think there's much stopping him for getting the takedowns if he needs it here. And then from on top, I trust his jiu-jitsu should be able to control Pickett on the ground. Will he be able to get a sub? Not 100% sure. Again, method of victory still up in the air for me on the Daukaus side of things. But I still think that Daukaus gets his hand raised here. Pickett, when he does good enough work, it's being able to strike from distance and get some decent success in the clinch work, or he can beat up on unproven guys like Joseph Holmes. And I think, again, that run is coming to a halt here in a guy in Daukaus who, I did lose a little bit of respect for in terms of losing the Phil Hawes fight the way that he did. But I think he's able to get that shit back here and beat a guy in Jamie Pickett who, fringe top 30, top 40 guy. Daukaus, I think, will eventually crack that top 15, but will likely always be that top 15 to top 13 guy. I like Daukaus here. Like I said, I'm not 100% sold on him getting the finish, but I still think he gets his hand raised by outworking Pickett here, pushing him up against the cage, landing takedowns, and just outworking him in pretty much every aspect of this fight. Last thing I'll say about this fight, I do remember seeing somebody saying that if you gave me Cheeto Vera's soul and put it into Jamie Pickett's body, he could be something. He could absolutely be something. But the guy just has a weird aura about him, a weird fighting style that he just doesn't use his physical gifts to the best of its abilities. And he just fights, the way that he fights, which is not the greatest. So I'm going Daukaus. I'm going to say decision, but parlay piece, probably. All right, let's move on to the main event here. Shout out to the 80 live viewers that we have at 1 a.m. Eastern time. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe before you guys hop on out of here. And we'll get into the main event, which short notice 5-rounder. Johnny Walker plus 200, minus 250 to return on Jamal Hill. As you guys know, Rafael Fiziev and Rafael Dos Anjos has been pushed to UFC 272 as the co-main event fight. Still a 5-rounder, which I'm completely down with. But do we really need 5 rounds for this one? Then again, that's where I said for Walker Santos, and a bunch of my degenerate parlays came to a crashing halt as they stared at each other for 25 minutes. Although there were some spots where they're throwing strikes and all that, and some close calls in terms of possible fight-ending strikes, but nothing to the point that ultimately ended the fight. So Walker, or SBG Walker, as we want to call him now, seems to be a little muzzled by John Kavanagh, right? We don't really see the crazy striking style of him anymore. We see him kind of using his kicks a lot to kind of gauge his range, and then starts to open up with a little bit of striking. But still, it seems more muzzled than we're used to seeing from him. Jamal Hill, probably one of my more egregious calls in his last fight against Jimmy Crute. Now, I didn't bet Jimmy Crute, but I absolutely wrote off Jamal Hill after he got submitted by Paul Craig, just as a lot of people did, which is why Jimmy Crute was the favorite that night. Jamal Hill was my lock of the night play against Paul Craig, and he goes out there and gets his arm snapped, and all of a sudden I just completely forget the reason why I bet him against Paul Craig, because those exact reasons were justifiable in the Jimmy Crute fight, and they played out. He was patient, waited for his opportunity, and found that sniper shot to put Jimmy Crute down. And that's exactly what could happen here against Johnny Walker. But we can't overlook the power that Walker brings to the table, not to mention some of the leg kicks that he can really start to stifle the movement and durability of Hill with. But I still think at a certain point, Hill's going to find that sniper shot. He's going to find that chin of Walker, which is very shaky, very, very shaky, very suspect. And I think that Hill has that sniper power to put him down here. So a couple ways to play this. I want to actually shout out my guy Z, who sniped these lines pretty well. I believe he released these plays a couple hours ago and brought them to my attention as well. Hill round 1, round 2. I think those are solid spots. I think those are in the plus. You know what? Let me just pull it up. I just don't want to guess here. Hill round 1 plus 300. Hill round 2 plus 500. I think those are the spots. Walker could absolutely find the knockout himself. I'd be surprised if this fight goes the full 25 minutes as well, because I think the reason the other one went the full 25 minutes, Walker obviously muzzled version of himself, but Thiago Santos can be disciplined when he needs to, and that's something we've been seeing a lot from him, especially since his win over Jan Blachowicz. Since then, we've seen him very disciplined. He's been going the distance in some of his fights. But Jamal Hill strikes me as the guy that's not going to play it that safe. Like, he will go out there and try to find the knockout. He's not going to play it safe to the extent of trying to go 25 minutes against a guy like Johnny Walker. So I like Hill, not paying the juice on him. Those props are laid out. I don't really mind that. Like I said, plus 300, plus 500 for round 1 and round 2 for Jamal Hill. I think eventually finds that knockout blow and it gets Johnny Walker out of there. There you guys have it. UFC Vegas 48. Again, apologize for the less of the glitz and glamour of the graphics and all that stuff, doing this shit on the live, but I am absolutely getting down to work on UFC Vegas 49 starting tomorrow. Those breakdowns are going to start to drop on the Patreon, the video breakdowns, and then you guys will get the full podcast on Monday of fight week. But that's what the Patreon is for anybody that wants to support your boy a little more. $5 a month. Again, not just for the picks. The picks have been shit this year, at least in terms of official bets. But it's for the early breakdowns. It's for the best bets and props article. It's for the Discord community. It's for the prize picks tips. It's for all the other shit, all the other endless amounts of work that I put into the Patreon. Again, $5 a month, not too much to ask there. For anybody that wants to support your boy a little extra, appreciate the love there. Otherwise, I appreciate the super chats. I appreciate the subs. I appreciate the likes. I appreciate everything that you guys do for your boy to allow me to do this thing full time. All right. Now, to finally give my voice a rest, want to do the last shout out to Coolbet here. Coolbet, use promo code MMALOTN2. They will match your initial deposit up to $200. Again, it's the number 2, MMALOTN2. You can parlay props. Great odds on there. One of my favorite bookies to use. One of the 3 active bookies that I use: Pinnacle, Coolbet, and Bookmaker. Coolbet usually gets a lot of my degenerate action, as it should for you guys as well. Lastly, more than likely won't have a lock of the night play on this card. Nothing I feel uber confident about, but I will start to draw plays tomorrow and maybe wait on a couple, depending on line movement and all that stuff. All right. Love you guys. Appreciate the midnight love here. But my voice is dead. I got to get out of here. Hit that like and subscribe on the way out. I'll be back tomorrow, actually, Wednesday, for a Deadlock podcast with my guy Clint. Pretty much just a news show. We got a lot of great segments and stuff there where we just to talk a bunch of shit. So if you guys want to swing by for that 7 p.m. Eastern, Thursday, propping you up, which will likely be around noon Eastern with my guy John Stargarian. Friday, Ultimate Wayne Show. I'm bringing back my guy Brandon Olivas. He's the guy that does the show with Santino DeFranco. Love my guy Brandon. He's really coming on Friday. And then Saturday, Fight Day live chat, 1 p.m. Eastern. Oh, yeah. Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, IG live as well. If you guys don't follow me on IG, make sure you guys follow me over there so I can talk to you guys and you guys can tell me what your favorite bets are for the upcoming card. 7 p.m. Eastern is your opportunity to do so. All right. Love you guys. Let's fucking go. I'll see you guys throughout the week.